It's great to be in the studio with a man whose name is renowned in the public radio world, probably the most well-known celebrity that no one's ever seen much, just the listeners of public radio, Mr. BJ Leiderman, who is a legend.
You can say that again.
Yes, BJ Leiderman, the legend. The man who Scott Simon calls the John Williams of public radio.
I'd rather be paid like the John Williams of John Williams. Hi, Pat. Good to be here in Florida with y'all.
Well, we're delighted to have you honor our studio this morning.
It's a beautiful place I'm sitting in. It's a very nice, well-tuned piano, which I don't usually get, and a beautiful staff. Anyway, it's good to be here.
Well, we wanted to make sure the piano was tuned for you.
Actually, I bang so hard on the piano that sometimes when I actually bring a piano back into tune, that's out, if it's out of tune. Anyway, it's a little early for me, folks, wherever you are, whenever this is airing. We're actually taping at 6 in the morning, so.
We know that's true. Well, of course, your music is well known to public radio listeners. We have, Morning Edition, Weekend Edition, Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, Science Friday, Marketplace, and then the now no longer around Car Talk. Did I get them all?
You pretty good. The Car Talk thing was a little segment inside Click and Clack's show called Stump the Chumps. It was a cartoony thing. And yes, when I play, I'll get around to playing the medley, and it's in there. Da 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 da. And Marketplace. Wait, wait, don't tell me. I don't know. 6 in the morning. Did you say that already?
Yeah. I'll tell you what. Let's start with the medley.
You want to start with the medley?
Yeah.
Oh God. Okay, here we go. Stand by.
How did you connect with NPR?
I'm out of breath. Well, here's the story. It's it's exactly what they tell you. They say it's a bit of talent and a great big bit of luck. And I had a bit of talent. I know still, maybe 5, 6 chords and major, minor, seventh, major seventh. You laughing in there? Engineers laughing. Okay, no classical. Beatles taught me, and so I had that much. Had a good friend named Skip Peasy, who was the chief engineer at NPR.
Know him well.
Yeah, back in the day. And he called me up one day. In fact, he woke me up, and he said, "Beej, they're doing a new morning show over at NPR. Would you like to do a demo?" And I said, "Of course I would." And it was about time I was studying broadcast journalism. Imagine that. I could have been a news guy under Ed Bliss at American University. And it was time for spring break. So I came home. I was also playing in a rock band called SME, S-M-E-E, Captain Hook's first mate, Peter Pan. SME 2, second edition. Anyway, we were a great cover band. And they had bought me a piano and this little synthesizer, which really wasn't a real synth because real synths had not been born yet, but this was one of those cheesy crosses between an electric piano and an organ. It was called a Krumar Orchestrator, and I went to Taco's house, our guitar player. He had a 4-track tape recorder, reel-to-reel 4-track tape recorder. Anyway, I did the demo there. I wrote the thing on my mom's piano. It came out immediately, And I had a meeting with Jim Russell, who was the original producer of Morning Edition. I mixed that down to a cassette tape, gave the tape to Skip Peasy, he gave the tape to Jim Russell, and Skip called me and said, "You did it, and they want to meet with you." So I wouldn't be speaking with you now if Jim Russell left NPR to form his own consulting company, the Show Doctor, Jim of blessed memory. He passed I think a year ago or somewhere around that. He was an amazing man, a great radio man, a great person. And this was a few months or so before the show was supposed to go on the air. There's a lot of backstory drama that you really don't need to know, but this was the second iteration of Morning Edition. And so Jay Kernis took the helm when Jim left. And before Jim left, he took the tape over into a creative meeting and put it on the table and said, "This is Leiderman's demo. We like it. Use it." And Jay liked it, and then so that's why I'm sitting here. If not for Jim, they could have gone in a totally different direction. So when it was time to actually go into the studio, I mean, it's no secret now, I still don't know how to read music. And so, the Beatles taught me how to play by ear. You just do everything note for note. We had a little band back in the day. So I guess that's why my stuff has, as they say in the business, has legs. I mean, as everybody probably knows, a few years ago there was a small shock to your system when Morning Edition came on the air with what they called a new
electronica.
Whatever. I actually phoned up those guys. They're a bunch of nice guys, great composers, called Man-Made Music in New York, and they told me a funny story, which I can tell now. Because, the intervening years, I tried to be a good boy because everybody else was yelling and screaming, "Where's our..." And I was a good boy. I have to pat myself on the back because everybody was telling me to go medieval on NPR. They've done me well, so I wasn't about to do that. But the guys at Man-Made Music said, "BJ, we tried. The edict from NPR was to get rid of your melody. for Morning Edition. They said we tried every way we could. We could not come up with a version that did not have your melody in it, that did not totally shock the listener. Anyway, the melody's still in there.
Yeah,
you know,
it is.
I'm a happy guy.
So I guess you're a pretty good negotiator. How did you manage to get,
I'm a pretty good negotiator.
recognition in perpetuity?
I'm a pretty good negotiator. You should see my car back home in Nashville. It was Jim Russell and Jay Curtis. I was so naive. I was 21 years old when I wrote this thing, 22 in 1979. Do the math, honey, for me. Something like that, when it went on the air on November 5th, 1979. And I used NPR's legal department. I didn't hire a lawyer myself. I didn't know anything about that. I didn't want to know anything about that. Because back in the day, NPR felt like a family. We really did. It was a bunch of young kids creating something out of nothing. It was before, the corporate idea took over and sort of started running things. And back then, everybody was kind of had each other's back. So Jim and or Jay, I can't remember, it was probably Jay by the time the contract, he turned to the head of legal and said, look, excuse me, we're not paying him all that much. So back in the day, what I got paid was pretty good. It looked good to me for a creative fee.
It's public radio. What do you expect?
And I don't know if I was a member of ASCAP yet and whether I was getting royalties yet. I eventually signed up. But Jay said, why don't we give him a credit, an on-air credit? And back then it was at the end of every show. And NPR was famous for honoring all of their staff on all of their shows. So the last, couple of minutes of every show, it may have alternated. If it was a daily show, it may have alternated, different days, but they got everybody in, including me. So it's in my contract. A few years ago, I don't know how many, 5 or so, they unilaterally stopped giving credits. And I know why. You don't have to focus group test this type of thing. When people hear credits, they figure it feels like the show's over, and a good number of them maybe switch the channel or do something else. That's why they have the whip around. And one show, there's 1 second of silence, and boom, you're into the other show. And they stopped saying mine as well. And I waited a few weeks. I was going, do I need to hire a lawyer for that? No, I just wrote her a letter. The same person who was the head of legal, Denise Leary, bless her heart, was still there. And she wrote back a couple of days later. She said, BJ, I'm so sorry. And she called me. She said, I'm so sorry. The young kids here were not there when we made this deal. They didn't know. And they put mine back on. And, some people like that. I'm raising my hand. Other people just don't understand it and don't like it. And I'm sorry, but I'm not going to ask NPR to stop.
Well, I'll tell you, personally, I always am anxious on Saturday morning to listen to Scott to figure out how he's going to work you into the show. That is the best part of the week for me. And I think he's done a great job of that.
When I visited NPR when my album came out, and we can talk about that later if you want, Scott took me to a special place in their corner of the building where they hold there's actually a whiteboard on the wall, and the staff, maybe I shouldn't blow this, but they have a pool going on. I don't know if they make money with it, but each one of the staff puts up which story they should put my credit in, which story Scott should say.
That's great. I love it. Well, I always look forward to it because it's so clever the way he does it.
He told me it's one of the things he looks forward to because he gets to be creative. I think my and I get to I'm not sorry, Scott. I'm not awake all the time at that hour. But yeah, I could listen to repeats, to reruns. But there was one time I got a text from somebody that said, Yo-Yo Ma just said your name on the air. And I went back, and it was Scott prompted him.
Yes.
He probably said, okay. By the way, you do know who writes our theme music? And Yo-Yo Ma said, yes, BJ Leiderman writes your theme music.
Well, that's just it. I'm not exaggerating when I say you're probably the most recognizable name on public radio, because your name is heard on public radio more than any of the other people on there.
Well, that's because I have a name like BJ Leiderman. If I had a name like John Lennon, nobody would ever heard of me.
Exactly.
Or George Harrison, if they didn't say my name, that would be wrong.
Yeah. I know you're a huge Beatles fan. I had heard that. I'd heard that. Yes, it's okay. It's you can't get it out of your system. I know it is. Back to, of course, it all started with Morning Edition.
Yeah.
Morning Edition has lyrics, I believe. I've heard that. In fact, I think I've heard them at some point. One of the old public radio conferences, I think they...
What usually happens in situations like this where an instrumental piece of music gets famous, well, now, anybody can do their own mashup. But somebody asked, was there lyrics? And me being the ham I am, there were no lyrics to begin with. And I think Oh, I hate to get up in the morning. Please don't wake me up this morning. Let me stay in bed and sleep. I don't want to daydream. The world can turn without me today. And if you wake me up, I will say that we will not be friends for long. The old version. Remember when we used to dream forever. Anyway, I don't remember the rest of it. That's the old version.
All right.
Wow. I can't believe I remember that. That's
Fantastic.
the original version.
It's fantastic. Now, you've done many other things musically outside of your fame on NPR. Talk about some of the things you're doing now and your album that you have out.
Well, the album, which is titled BJ, and it's got a photo on the front of me when I had hair down to my shoulders, and actually run through a filter that looks like I'm on all kinds of psychedelics. I had been talking about doing this stupid album for 3 decades or so, and my friends in Virginia Beach, my old pals and bands, they got on me. They said, one guitar player said, when I moved to Asheville, he said, BJ, if you don't do your album while you're in Asheville, I'm going to come up and beat your ass. He ended up being on the album in Asheville. It was a labor of love. Some of the songs I had written years and years before. Some I'd written just a few months before for the album. I have a band in Asheville that I play live with, and they're a great band. Right? The BJ Leiderman Band. Some weeks it's the BJs. Sometimes I change it every week. If I had a bad show, I'll change it to something else. But the backup band on this album is the Randall Bramlett Band, hailing from the Athens area of Georgia. Mm-hmm. Unbelievably wonderful band. The bass player was in one of my earlier cover bands, Mike Steele. But Randall and the boys came down to Asheville in a wonderful studio called Echo Mountain. It's a beautiful studio with a fabulous staff. And I also was very lucky to have an introduction to Bela Fleck, incomparable banjoist and other, plays every string instrument, but he was at a festival called the Leaf Festival, and my assistant at the time, and yes, her name is, drum roll, you may insert the sound effect here, Barbie Angel. She took my hand and said, come on back after Bela had played. And she took me backstage. She introduced me to Bela. And she'd already told him I had an album and I had some instrumentals. And so he just looked at me and said, yeah, man, send me 5 or so of your instrumentals, and I'll pick a few. He called me up. He said, I'll play on these 3, and you can come to Nashville and produce me. I went,
Wow.
holy hell. And so Barbie and I drove to Nashville, and in his home studio, he had already written the parts that he wanted to play. But these are just short, like 1.5 to 2 minute pieces, 3 of these things, and he just killed it. And the producer is a guy named Eric Serafin. He goes by the name of Mixer Man. He just arrived in Nashville from L.A., where he had produced and engineered some of the biggest albums on the charts. He didn't have anything on the books because he'd just come, and I guess he had me over and listened to the songs and said he liked them, and it all just gelled. I had been afraid to pull the trigger because I already had, public radio success. And this stuff, the music, thanks to, and I have to mention here, I do have to mention Jim Pugh, who was an A-list trombonist in the recording studio scene in New York. And he's also an arranger. And the time had come for me to do the second arrangement. Every 3 to 5 years, they would bring me back in the studio to freshen up the sound a bit. They put me together with Jim Pugh on the second arrangement, and then when Weekend Edition started, we had strings. And I didn't, when I did the first Morning Edition, I did not know the ranges of the instruments. I wrote the stuff on a synthesizer so you could have a flute go all the way up to here and down to here. And when it came time to play, the flute player came over to me and said, well, this instrument does not go down. I was so naive. But the first arrangement was sort of, I guess I use the word cute because of my naivete. But Jim Pugh, who, by the way, has been playing with Steely Dan for the last couple of decades, playing on records and in concert. I was, this was a new thing I was stepping into, and I guess that's why it took all those years for me to start it, because I was just scared. I was afraid. But I realized, I'd read it often enough and I'd heard it often enough, and the saying is, surround yourself with people better than you and get out of the way. And I finally did that. Mixer Man said, hey, here's how much it's going to cost. You give me, this is the money. I'll book the studio. I'll make the arrangements with the band. And in 90 days, you'll have an album. And by God, he was true to his word. And I'm extremely proud of it.
You going to play something for us off the album?
Oh, it's 3 a.m. You really want me to? Yeah, I'll try a little bit. This is a song, a hopeful song, that I wrote when I heard Paul Simon, Paul Simon's American Tune. Once a fine young dreamer, witness to the time when the one who bears the answer comes at last. And you almost fooled yourself, refused to walk the line. When you found your one last chance, it already passed. So you stand on your principles and you swear your God is near. But your God can't protect you from all of the demons you fear. drive an empty boulevard, stare into the night, wondering what became the dream that you lost. You glance in the mirror, looking weary from the fight, but the voice in your head says to go on, no matter the cost. But your sensory system is down, you're not feeling like you should, and you'd go back to work in the morning if only you could. So bring on the sunrise. Bring on the sunrise, yeah, yeah. How can you answer the question of life? You keep asking why you're here. When you're finally asleep, all the answers you seek will be clear. So bring on the sunrise. Bring on the sunrise, yeah. I promised you a second song off the album. This one's a rocker. I have to introduce this the right way. I wrote this just like that. It was the night of the commencement of Desert Storm, #1. And I stood in front of my TV set in my living room in horror as this thing unfolded. I think it was 8 p.m. You know, they did it for TV, waiting for the, staring at the green lit screen and then watching. And it had graphics and theme music, and I went ballistic. And this song came out. People tell me that I think too much about what I see, but all I know is what I read in the paper and watch on TV. If truth is is the first victim of war. There's an army of liars pounding on my door, and it's getting so hard to know just what to believe. When they tell you what's right is wrong, it's just so hard to believe. Yeah. People I used to think that if I worked real hard I would be okay. But in an instant, someone with a gun would take it all away. Ain't no tomorrow and no master plan, just today, so give it all you can, and pray to whoever you have to put you at ease. I hope whoever comes to save you will like what he sees. Sometimes I catch myself telling my boy about the good and the bad, but he's just hearing my old fairy tale and the effect it had. Everybody's gotta pay the rent, except the homeless and the president. Everybody stuck in between is just like yesterday's news, when the only real choice that's left is the freedom to choose.
Okay, the album BJ, how can people get that?
BJ Leiderman, spelled LEIDERMAN.com. You can buy it there, and you can also get in touch with me there. You can communicate with me, and I will communicate back. Also, if you here at the station want to, I left some CDs here at the station, and you might be able to quote, win yourself one of those if you're a lucky person. And it's going to be valuable because it's the only one I'm going to do. I'm not going to do a second album. Not going to do it. Wouldn't be prudent.
Thank you, BJ Leiderman, for your time,
Why don't you
your
say
talent.
that again? Take two.
Thank you, BJ Leiderman, for your time and your talent. It's been a great visit, and we appreciate you being here for us this early morning.
It is early, but hey, they didn't ask me to do All Things Considered. It would be a different deal. Pat Crawford, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it. Thank
My
you
pleasure,
so much.
completely.
And I appreciate all the listeners here. You do so much for the community. It's about community. And thanks again.